This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
All the way from the A, you listen to my favorite lesbian on BRQ.
Hey, stay locked in with your favorite lesbian on Black Radical Queer. Yeah.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms. Before diving into this episode, I want to take a moment to tell y'all about Black Radical Queer on Patreon. Patreon is a great way to support the podcast because those contributions help to offset the cost of making this thing happen. So production costs, editing costs, hosting fees, all of the funds from the Patreon go towards supporting that and keeping this podcast moving right on along. Also, there's perks to becoming a patron because you get early access to the episodes and you also get a discount on all BRQ merch. So it's a great way to support. I appreciate my current patrons. And if you want to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com. So Patreon is patreon.com/BlackRadQueer, BLK RAD QWR. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get into this episode. Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole. Welcome to another episode of Black Radical Queer Podcast. This particular episode is part of the series QLIC by BRQ. QLIC stands for, is QLIC, and that is pronounced QLIC, like I said. And it stands for Queer Love in Color. And so for this series, I want to focus on really the love stories of queer people, their backgrounds in terms of like what their love style is, who they love, how they came to realize who they love, what examples they had of queer love, if any, what type of representation they've seen or they would like to see. So really doing this exploration of love and relationships and romance and all of that through the perspective of queer people of color. So for my guest today, as usual, I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. My guest is Raven. If you want to get to know more, as always, at the end, I'll make sure to include any like information about where to like find them or, things like that. So depending on what they're willing to share with y'all, they may not want y'all they may not want want y'all in their business after the episode, but if so, then I'll make sure you have the information. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and allow them to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Raven. I currently am a Detroit resident. My pronouns are she, her, they, and I identify as a demisexual, technically pansexual, but very much demisexual. And right now I am poly, but right now I'm single. I've been in quite a few poly relationships, both while being in the BDSM community and experiencing various power dynamics. But also as a vanilla person, just having as much fun as possible. So yeah, that's me.
So you said that you've had like various types of experiences and things like that. So how did you even, I guess, come to get to know your own identity as a queer person, like coming to this realization that you were demi, that you were pansexual? And then too, for some, I do have like a broad range of listeners and they may not all know what demi is.
Sure.
So if you could kind of give what that means for you specifically.
No, it's I have no problem. I love to explain it. So for me, being demisexual means that I have sexual attraction to people that I have chemistry with, or that I have a really profound or deep connection with. And sometimes it's not, always the case, but most of the time I get hot for people who I knowingly have a very strong connection with. And if I don't, then I'm a little bit more reluctant to open up to this person romantically, emotionally, sexually. So, and I came into that After realizing, number one, asking questions about how other people navigated sex, emotional relationships, and companionship, and also how they navigated casual sexual encounters too. And just asking questions like, so do you always experience the same sexual attraction for people you meet right away, or do you have to wait around? And then, so that's kind of how I navigated how I gauged my own response to people in that way. And I'm be honest with you, I didn't always know that I was attracted to pretty much the entire spectrum of people. I think that when I studied abroad, so I went to Buenos Aires, and I got to see, and for people who don't know, it's pretty much you'll see various types of couples making out in the street. And I was like, okay, this is like my sexual ideal utopia for right now. They have like gigantic swingers clubs. I did not get the chance to visit, unfortunately, but what I did notice was that my comfort and my interest in women kind of peaked at this time. And I was like 22. So then after I came back, that was when I really started exploring when I started having encounters with women, but also exploring how the intimacy changed for me and when I was attracted to someone. So I think I just everything kind of evolved from there. I started noticing that I'm more drawn to older women, and also to not just women, but like I said, the whole spectrum. So I dated trans people, trans women, gender non-conforming, non-binary people, asexual, like a wide range of people. And I noticed that if, like I said before, if I didn't immediately, or I guess after a certain amount of time, feel a connection with them, that would make me continue forward, that I knew it wasn't something that was meant for me. And I always trust my intuition in these matters too. So it's definitely been naturally like the behavior of intuition is something that you have to learn over time. So I guess my sexuality or my interest in other people has kind of evolved in that way. Just kind of like a natural exploration and allowing myself to be to trust what spirit tells me. Does it make sense? Sometimes I feel like I'm blabbering when I talk about myself.
No, that makes sense. So, I mean, did you have, prior to you kind of having this exploration for yourself, did you have any kind of examples of, of these kind of relationships or anything? So prior to you even studying abroad and being able to really see this diverse range of relationships and connections, just kind of in front of you, prior to that, what examples were you able to see, or just to kind of let you know that there were a range of possibilities for what love and romance and sex and intimacy and stuff could look like for you?
Sure. So I think that what I had noticed right away when I was down there was that when you see different forms of intimacy being public, number one, if you're not repulsed like a lot of people who are kind of closed in are, then it immediately makes you kind of question, like, I want to see more of that, if it's definitely something that piques your interest. And I had pretty much, I think after I came back, I had a really close girlfriend, and at the time she was a friend, and she was kind of expressing in a nuanced way, and I knew I liked her, but she expressed in a nuanced way that she had feelings toward me, and we just kind of went from there. And naturally, it went slow, but I think I always wanted the interaction that I had with her was kind of unique for me, because it was the first time where I got to like be comforted, and I wasn't afraid of, I wasn't, how do I put this? I wasn't afraid of the person that I was talking to. With me, sometimes with men, there is an overtone of this person might not be who they say they are. This person, like if I go on a date with them, are they going to attack me? And I'm always thinking about stuff like that too. But I think when I started dating people who were not straight, who didn't identify, because she identified as non-binary, when I started dating people who really question things outside of heteronormativity and cis heteronormativity, it kind of opened my mind to that. Like I had roommates who weren't cis that we had conversations about. I had met their partners that they met. I'd watched them fuck a few times, and it was kind of like, ultimately, it was like finding a place where you were comfortable, where you knew those were the kinds of interactions you wanted, and experiencing that from somebody I was close to, it felt really good. And I'm happy I got the chance to kind of see that and I was around a lot of white people, so seeing it from a person of color was like dope. And that kind of like pushed me, or kind of gave me room to explore myself when I came back home. And then even more so when I had entered the lifestyle after that, it was really like all speed ahead. Like there's so many beautiful people that I'm meeting, people who would introduce me to so many different experiences, so many different orientations, gender types. There's so many different outward expressions of people and how they identify with the various aspects of themselves. So it's been quite a few. It's been an interesting few years. I think I'm really excited and happy about my sex so far. I think I've done a good job. It's not always been easy too, because when you're kind of around a lot of people who are Christian, who don't necessarily like see eye to eye with you, you question yourself. But I think having the strong intuition that I do have, like, it's given me a lot of space to kind of affirm and be affirmed, especially with the people that I surround myself by.
Like growing up, I would think about kind of like my future and what that looked like, you know, the types of what like potential relationships would look like, romantic relationships, having a family and all that kind of stuff. So when you were younger, like a child, what did you envision your future looking like? Like, what did you envision for like love, or, you know, did you envision marriage or kids or any of that kind of stuff? And how did that evolve over time?
When I was younger, I had mostly straight couples around me, and I had a lot of straight experiences. And, you know, I bought into the typical, like, you know, 1.2 children, 2.5 children, white picket fist type of shit. And I imagined myself getting married, you know, to a man, and I think when I was younger, it wasn't the idea or aspects of queerness weren't necessarily something I was around a lot. And I wasn't around that until I got older. So, but it's funny because looking back, I was more comfortable with the people around me that may have become queer later on. Like, I had a neighbor who she was a lesbian then. I didn't know she was a lesbian. We were like in middle school. And I just knew that she dressed like a tomboy, and she was always around this one girl that always spent the night at her house, not knowing that was her girlfriend, you know, my cute little naive self. But growing older and kind of being around more people kind of unlock those doors, because you don't really know yourself until you're in an environment that tests you and also forces you to ask questions about your existence. It forces you to see, like, no, this is who you really are. This is the exploration, the desire to be in concert with the various parts of myself was what prompted me to be open to that sexual exploration. And I'm happy that, I got the chance to be around the people that I've been around. I've been open to being around the people, because I would not have experienced I would not have been open to half the people that I'm friends with now who have enriched my life greatly. And also too, I haven't been able to see myself and see the beauty of my sexual being, and see the beauty of me being open to the people that I meet on a soul level, not just like, no, I'm just into one particular type of person. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think for me, it is more appropriate for me to be open to kinship on various levels with different types of people. So I think just being in the world has opened up my orientation, and how I see my sex.
So you said that when you were younger, you kind of envisioned what's pretty much like the stereotypical future of like, the picket fence, the house, the, 1.2 kids, the, husband, all that kind of stuff. And that also you were surrounded by a lot of Christians and stuff like that. And that heavily influenced kind of what you saw as possible for like, your future and stuff like that. So how did you, because some of that shift away from that started, based on my understanding of what you expressed, some of that shift started prior to you studying abroad, and like there had to be some type of transition for you to be more open. You mentioned like becoming more open to being around different kinds of people, exploring different things. So what was there something that was really like the catalyst between, okay, this is kind of like my view of what I see for my life based on what's been informed by my experiences thus far, this background, the people I'm around, I see straightness, I'm taught straightness, like this is what I'm surrounded by, shifting from that to, hey, I'm open to the possibility of something else, because that in and of itself is a transition. Everybody doesn't necessarily get to a place where they're like, hey, even though this is what I've been taught, I'm open to something else being a possibility for me. So it's like, there's, I'm just curious if there was something that created that openness or whatever that allowed you to shift to that place of being open prior to having the studying abroad and stuff like that.
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question. Like prior to me going abroad, what was it that allowed me to be more open? Because I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't always open. I think I wasn't always open sexually, because I wasn't like sexual until a later age, until after I came back. But I think I've always been open to different people, always been interested in supporting people. And that's not to say I was like, homophobic or I didn't really support gay people. No, I was definitely in, gay straight alliances. I consider myself an ally for a long time, not really knowing like, hey girl, you might want to go ask yourself some critical questions, or just kind of put yourself, go meet more people. So I don't think I have a specific point in time that I can orient myself to, or kind of see as the opening to the window to myself. I think it's mostly just my adventurous spirit, or I guess just my openness of just learning how to be open and learning adventure at a young age from my family.
I mean, that makes sense. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a specific turning point or anything like that. I mean, I think that, if it was something that was gradual and it just was kind of like, hey, I was just, open, and that is, totally fine too. Yeah. For some folks, it may be more abrupt where there's like something that happens and they're like, or for some folks it's a gradual thing. And for some folks it's a combination. Like for me, it definitely was a combination of the gradual receptiveness, I guess, and a point like, or a moment or something or moments where there were kind of little light bulbs that went off. So for instance, I remember, I mean, growing up, I always knew I liked girls. I liked boys, but not like I liked girls. Like, I mean, I recognized that like, I like I would find boys cute and I could hang out with them, but there was always something different. I always had this like a deeper, almost like an admiration for girls that I did not have for boys. Like for boys, I'm like, oh, I like him. He's cool. He's cute. He's fun. He's smart, whatever. But I can't say that I had like admiration. That wasn't really a part of it. So, but I just remember growing up, even being real little and like having crushes on girls, have crushes on boys too, just liking who I liked. And then when I got to like later on in elementary school, I remember like having this friendship, which this is something I end up thinking back on like later because of how I am now when it comes to just how I define love and how I love and that kind of thing. But I had this friendship with this girl and I just adored her. And at the time I didn't have that language, but as I got older, I look back at it, I'm like, we had a very intimate friendship, not necessarily sexual, but very like intimate, tender. It's just some of the moments we had. I just was looking back at it like, we were how old? Like we were like in 5th grade. And I don't know, like looking back, I can definitely tell like, okay, yeah, you were like just open, for this girl. And just the way that we would interact with each other was just very like, I don't know, the best word I could think of is definitely tender, very just like tender with one another and very close and very intimate and very like vulnerable. And it just was interesting to me and it seemed very mature. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know. We had this like, it seemed like there was a lot of stuff that we didn't have to say. Like we would just kind of give each other looks and we had both been through some similar experiences and stuff like that. And so it was like knowing that you had this person who understood you and you didn't have to break everything down. And so that was like very interesting to me. And I just remember it kind of shaking me up, like even in 5th grade, me just being like, there's something. My 5th grade mind, I'm not quite sure what's up with this, but something about this is like really sticking to me. And then once I got to high school, I remember like I hung around all kinds of people and I was just used to that. That's like my mom, my grandmother, they were just like attracted people, all orientations, all genders, like and they were just like, everybody's family, it's whatever. So I was already accustomed to that. But when I started high school, I was hanging around a bunch of folks and then I noticed I mainly hung around like the Black queer folks. I didn't even think about it that deep. I just like, they actually said something to me because I was like the only one who had not necessarily identified as like queer or anything. And, but I would just be hanging around them and just hanging out and whatever. And I remember this girl was just like, Javia, you're gay.
That's wild.
And I was like, and instead of like, because other people would have probably got an attitude or like been like, what, snapped on her. And I literally just kind of stopped and was like, I hadn't considered that. Like, yeah. I just really was just like,
oh, okay.
Let me think about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, for real. So that's why, I asked like, okay, was there a moment or whatever? But see, for me, it was like this series of moments as well as just this gradual thing. So once that was stated, I really was just like, okay, I didn't feel any kind of way. I was just like, like, you're not necessarily wrong. I don't know if you're right. I hadn't really thought about it. I knew how I felt, but for some reason I had not really connected the concept of gayness like to myself. I just knew I had never had any doubt about like me liking girls or anything like that, or I just had never really considered like this. That's the best I can describe it, is like this whole concept of gayness or being a lesbian or being bi or anything. So initially I came out as bisexual because I just wasn't sure, honestly. I've always been sure about women. I was not sure about men. And so I was just like, I don't know. And then briefly, when I was like dating someone who was trans, and then I was debating about, oh, well, do I want to like identify as pansexual or whatever? But I went through like all this different stuff, and I just was like, queer. I lean more toward lesbian. My affinity is for women, and not just cis women, to be very clear, because I don't play that. I don't play like that exclusionary type of thing, but just women, typically women and non-binary people is what I lean toward, but definitely more so women, femmes, like that side. But yeah, so it was like a series. It was kind of like some moments and also a gradual thing. But I think it's just interesting because as you grow up and you see different kinds of people, you have different kinds of experiences, you start to factor that into like how you see yourself and what that means and making sense of the world. But also something that straight people have the benefit of is that they also get to see that happen in media. So it gives you more material to work with, you know, to start to make sense of the world. Like you have more reference points. Whereas for queer folks, we don't have that. And then a lot of times when we do have that, it is very white. So for you, was there any type of like media, TV, songs, movies, anything that like, that showed any type of representation that intrigued you or piqued your interest, or you're just like, okay, that showed anything outside of just like heteronormativity?
It was Tumblr. So when I was like in Tumblr, like the great era, golden years of Tumblr, and like from like 2010 to 2015, Black Tumblr was like the place to be, and so much critical work had been done. We had the term, people that coined the term misogynoir and Latinx were like literally vibrant on Tumblr at that time, and we were experiencing waves of being able to describe and in like see each other, see our expressions as what we needed them to be, and explore it and allow each other to grow in those expressions. And I think seeing so many happy ass Black people, BIPOC people, being gay as fuck in whatever capacity they wanted to be, in whatever expression they felt closely resembled who they were at their essence. I think that was a really pivotal growing point for me, because I had joined Tumblr right while, and it's funny because I joined it right when I was in Argentina trying to connect to one of my friends, and she was like doing my blog. So I went on there and I was connecting with so many people from around the world, like even people I had met coming back home, and that's how I had got out of the reverse culture shock. But I think seeing so many different queer people from around the world and seeing us change, seeing, number one, the term queer, having that conversation come up between elder queer people and younger queer people was important for me, because I needed to understand how the nuances of words affect us as people who are marginalized. I needed to see how the one thing that I love seeing, that even still to this day I still have a fascination and adoration of, was seeing masculine Black women in the most regal forms in discourse around what it means. Like I had met the members of Brooklyn Boyhood. I had seen a lot of Black trans people go pre and post-op, and then have discussions about what body dysmorphia is. I think it was such a critical time for me it was so much information I was getting.
A lot of that information definitely happened on Tumblr. It's interesting because, you know, well, I'm older than you, so there's like it's kind of happened in different spaces based on age. And so Tumblr, you know, was kind of like a later like wave of that, but it was such an important like format and like vehicle to have because it showed so many iterations of queer love, queer sex, queer intimacy, joy, and especially for people of color. And so to see that it's so readily available, and for people to be able to just like contribute it themselves. And I feel like it added another layer versus for me when I was younger, the thing that was kind of like the space for my my folks or whatever was Downlink. So Downlink was really the place where I was able to connect to other queer people of color. It's where I connected to a lot of trans people of color. And because I specifically, I had already been a part of Downlink or whatever, but I ended up like dating. So I had a former, an ex or whatever, who we had dated like a while ago prior to his transition and prior to him really kind of like coming into his gender identity. And then we kind of like ran back into each other and ended up dating again. And at this point he was like full on into his transition and like, you know, had scheduled top surgery and all this kind of stuff. And so for me, it was newer territory for me because I had been so accustomed to lesbian relationships. Like that was what I was accustomed to. And so I wanted to be more knowledgeable and know how to like support him through his surgery and just learn. I mean, I was still young, but I just wanted to have more information. So Downlink had all these different groups, and they had a group that was like, I want to say it was called Trans and Friends. I might be wrong, but I really feel like it was called Trans and Friends. And it was like just this queer little mecca. It was so dope. It was like a bunch of trans folks of color, a bunch of queer folks of color, all just mingling. And there were a lot of trans men who really helped me to kind of like understand more about, you know, hey, what might be some ways to best support? And I mean, of course I talked to him too, but just to give me a better understanding and, you know, of what are some things, or what do you wish, like, you know, someone had done for you during your transition, or just little stuff like that. And so it was just a place to soak up knowledge and make these connections. And there are some folks from that time that I am still in connection with today. One guy in particular is just like, I call him my brother because like he legit low-key looks like he could be my brother. But he just was such a wealth of information and also just a dope ass person. And we just really clicked. Yeah. So it's awesome. And so to me, I feel like I've seen that happen like with MySpace, with Black Planet, with, you know, Downlink, with Tumblr, with Twitter, having all these different, and sometimes with Facebook groups, but having all these different avenues, like online avenues that really bridged communities, that allowed us to have conversations across generations, across cultures, and across like geographic boundaries. So I think that you mentioned in Tumblr definitely is something that is important. And I feel like it was a very, very useful forum that just unfortunately was just ran down. That really was taken away, was snatched away, honestly.
Pretty much.
Which sucks because Tumblr was just, and I was a little bit late to Tumblr because I was more so like, I made a lot of connections on Twitter after like the Downlink age was over or whatever. A lot of connections on Facebook and Twitter, but especially Twitter. Is in a lot of those folks still to this day, like we're still, you know, connected to each other. So, but then once I found Tumblr though, Tumblr was a game changer. And I think the difference with that is each of these different platforms offered something. So I think that with MySpace, it allowed a lot of opportunities for one-on-one connection, you messaging someone one-on-one. Same for Black Planet. I think Downlink had groups. Downlink had like chat groups. And that was really my first experience with an online chat group that people from all over the world can join and talk to each other and just have a good time. And so we were able to connect in that way, but it was still very personal. Tumblr, I feel like, introduced the imagery. So it introduced like media, whereas everything else was more so about those intimate, interpersonal connections, which is important. But Tumblr also introduced media, like people can share their music by queer artists, people can share pictures from photo shoots, people can share their love stories, share, you know, they got married, they can share all kind of like, they can share erotic images and videos and stuff like that of queer people of color, and everybody can access it. And so that was definitely a game changer. And so thinking about this whole concept of like queer love and being able to see it, like actually see it on a screen, Tumblr made a huge difference. I think for me, Tumblr and YouTube have been the game changers in regards to that, for me to be able to see it. And so it's just something that we didn't get to, like I told other folks, like I did a poll to see like, hey, did y'all see any like Black and brown queer love represented? And like 97% of people said no. And I asked across all social media platforms, and
wow.
most people, like 97% of the folks who responded said no. So for us to have these avenues is so important. So to me, it's so messed up that Tumblr is now basically defunct.
It is. There's still people on there, but for me, I found Twitter. It's funny. I found Twitter and Tumblr at the same time. Twitter, I was on, but then Tumblr was like my main bread and butter, and then still in Twitter. I see Twitter more for different like professional and other resources, but Tumblr, like, it allowed me to find the words for what I was experiencing. It allowed me to,
and you can find some pictures to go with it.
Baby, you did.
You know, the image, like Tumblr is just, to me, is just so extraordinary when it comes to the like.
I know.
I saw so many images, like some of my first images of seeing like even like queer power exchange, queer kinky
I was just gonna get to that
and stuff like that.
Yes,
was Tumblr. Like I didn't
that's
see it
how I
nowhere
got
else.
into it. That's how I got in lifestyle, from Tumblr, because there was at that time, it was a huge Black Tumblr community.
That was the biggest one. Like that was the biggest
Yes.
Black kink community online was Tumblr. Like even more so than, you know, Fed and all kinds of stuff. It was Tumblr.
Yes, that was
like,
how. That's how I
my
met
first
my
time
first
seeing an image of like a my first time seeing an image of like a Black woman dominant, Tumblr.
I remember her. She, and that has shaped really not just my not just my kink identity and how I entered spaces like that, but in terms of orientation and sex and how visually, how powerful and strong one was. I saw this dom from New York, her profile, and she was just a Black woman with locks standing there with this big ass strap on. And you could see she had like armpit hair, she had stretch marks, and she was just fucking beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, the imagery, yes, you're absolutely right, the imagery. And then there was so much content people were creating as Black Kinksters.
It definitely was a great forum for like original content creators. And I mean, I really got into it because at the time I was doing photography and I was modeling. And so I wanted a place to be able to connect with other content creators. And I was doing a lot of poetry. And so I used to have like a blogspot blog or whatever, and that was like dead. Nobody was using that anymore.
Oh, same,
so I was like,
same.
I was like, how can I connect, how can I connect to other creators and other poets and other photographers and other models, and, share my stuff and see more images. Because at the time I was doing a lot of pinup and boudoir, and I did not see a lot of basically fat Black women in those images. When I would find Black pinup, it would be slim. A lot of times light skin. And so I'm like, look, I'm dark skinned and I'm big and I'm doing this style. And so I went there to try to find those images. And that was one of the first places I was able to find images. But it's funny because like my images have circulated so much on there. People be like, this is you. Like it's still to this day. Like,
and I think actually that's because I think that's when I saw some of your initial images where you were on Tumblr. Yeah.
Probably.
And
like my poetry, my images.
Your boudoir images. Yeah.
Just all in these internets.
Yeah.
I was like, if somebody tried to leak my news, I'd be like, oh, well, like you ain't going to phase me because I done been all over the internets, honey.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, that's probably, but it was just one of those places where I could share like share my content, but also be exposed to so much content. I met some amazing people. It's just so dope. It makes me so sad to see what happened with Tumblr.
So dope. And then and also it makes me sad too, because there were so many people that now currently have platforms like, for instance, Kid Fury, Followed that nigga since the early days.
Oh,
Chelsea Khalid, yeah, her
Look,
too. Like so many people.
Kid
Ethiopia,
Fury following him when he used to just be making videos in his apartment talking about
Making-
Trina all the time.
Right, that's what I said. Bitch, you ready for the club?
He used to only talk about Trina
Yes.
like every time.
Yes.
And then Chesca Lee, I followed Chesca Lee when she was Chesca Locks.
Yep.
When she did her locks, because I started my locks, and I was looking for black like lock content creators or whatever, and she was one of the first ones I found. So I started following her and following her lock journey and started doing lock styles and stuff based on her. So yeah, it's like all this like it's been such a resource. It's been a resource, but also a community space to connect with other people. And there's not a lot of every platform doesn't provide that. And so thinking about this whole concept of like love and romance and stuff, it provided a platform for that too, to be able to make those love connections, whether they be romantic or platonic, being able to make those sexual connections, those intimate connections, everything from hookups to marriages. Like it's people who met
on
through
Tumblr,
that who got married, and it's people
met
whether it's
so
like
many
for
people
one night or for
married.
a lifetime, whatever, but
yeah,
having that place to be able to go to where you're not being judged, where you can meet your kindreds, I think is so important. And it really combined basically representation and community and connection. So it's like I can go to this place and see representation, like I was talking about media and stuff like that. I can see the images and the videos and the music and everything, but I can also connect with other people. And that is incredibly rare for queer people of color. Like we don't really have that, for straight folks, it's like it's everywhere because everything is infused in everything. So everything's already built for that. But when you're, a queer person and you're a queer person of color, that's not how the world is set up.
I know.
So I can't make those connections everywhere.
Yeah, that's why like initially I had thought about TV, but then I was like, no, Tumblr is, I think, the internet. And I was, I think the best explanation for how white people experience queerdom is on TV, right? They have those experiences they can go to. We don't. We have to create our own. We have created our own, and we see it.
We're supposed to just be satisfied with seeing them. Like even like I on another recording, another episode or whatever, I talked to somebody and I mentioned the L word, and I'm like, the L word, I don't connect to the L word. Like I can watch it as a form of media and it being just like, oh, this is just an entertaining show, but I never connected with it as a queer person. Like this is not my queer experience. My queer experience is not white, middle class, or white, whatever. Like that's just not what it looks like for me, and then I mean there's been some YouTube content too, and so that has been game changer, lots of YouTube content
between women.
And I mean I'm from Atlanta, so
I know.
So I'm like I know some of the folks, but yeah, it's like being able to have that is very important, so that we're able to see just some options and have more material to work with to make sense of the world. So and then the last thing that I wanted to ask about was for you, if there's any like connection or relationship between like social justice and your queerness, or and like who you love, how you love, are those things intertwined for you at all?
Yes. On two fronts. So for me, I feel like anytime a Black person takes ownership of who they are, it is a revolutionary act because we do it for ourselves. That is very important. That's an important tenet to my life that I live by. If I do something out of self-love, that is my revolution. And so political also too. That's how I show up. And so that's how I walk into spaces where I'm in movements and doing that work to support not just Black people, but also trans people of color, Black trans women, especially here. How I show up for women who are sex workers, or people who are sex workers who are in need of support, as I have the resources to do so and am privileged to be able to do so. That's a main like tenet of my life. Like if I'm giving to other people, it definitely feeds me in return. Living my revolutionary life, living it out loud, has been a journey. And I think that as a Black person, especially now, in having all of these different platforms that we've had, that we get to be visible, that we put ourselves on, where we illustrate, this is what my Blackness, my queerness, my womanhood, whatever, this is what I look like. That's my ritual that I'm doing. That's my ritual that I get to do in public. I get to love on myself in public. Therefore, these are my politics. You know what I stand for when I'm standing in front of you with my rainbow flag, with my tits out, my fat ass out. You get to see, if I'm yelling, if I'm crying, you get to see me, know what I'm standing for, because I would rather do this than to die in the ways that the people who come before me have. I would much rather live being myself than lying to myself and lying to everybody else. And even more so on a personal level, even if I get to interact with people who are younger or people who might need support, might need might need to have these conversations, it's still like, look, I'm here. These are the resources. This is what I can offer you. And so I recently have been involved in what my friend Zoe Villegas has coined the whole army. We've been doing photo shoots in support of ICE. So it's pretty much a battalion of women who are either sex workers, who are allies, who are queer, we're all different types of things, disabled, whatever. And we've been supporting people who've been detained. So it's stuff like that that allows me to further staying grounded in who I am as a person.
Yeah, that's very important. I always say, for folks who listen to the show, I'm sure are tired of hearing me say it, but I always say, like, the personal is political. I mean, for me, the personal is political. Those things are very much intertwined. They are not separate. My politics are not something that I put aside. I don't like take them off like work clothes when I get home. My politics are, I eat, sleep, breathe them. They're very much a part of everything I do. And so definitely, like you said, living your revolutionary life is a radical act. And I try to tell folks that all the time, like, your existence is radical in a world that don't want you to be here. That's a revolutionary act. Even one of my favorite quotes, I included it on the email I sent out to y'all, where I was like, to love in a time of injustice is a revolutionary act.
Yes, the fuck it
Tanya
is.
Ingram's quote. But I've always loved that quote, because even that, like, to me, my most personal thing, my most sacred thing is my wife. And even that is revolutionary, to boldly, visibly, as you said, to love her, and to be very, very vocal about it, very out about, and not saying you have to be out to be right. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying the existence of it, because everybody's in different situations, and my people already know I don't believe in pushing folks out, and I don't believe that you have to be out to be valid or none of that shit. So not that, but what I mean is just like existing in that and daring to, proclaim, like, hey, I do love this woman. This is my, partner. So even something as personal as that, to me, knowing that I'm waking up every day and I'm loving a Black woman, that's radical. In a world that don't love us, stuff like that. So I think that what you mentioned about, living a revolutionary life and it being intertwined, definitely, like, I'm always saying that. And sometimes folks be like, what? But that's what it is. I mean, ultimately, that's what it is. So I think that is very important. But before wrapping up, I want to check and see, did you have anything you want to plug or promote? Do you want to share, like, any social media handles or anything with the people if they want to keep up with you?
Yes. So people can feel free to add me. I'll just go down the list. Facebook, I believe I'm Raven Martin. And I have a fuck ice mask on there from my photo shoot. Instagram, I am Cut the Bow. Twitter, I am Cut the Bow as well. CUTTHEBOW. Or you can actually also, if you want to like reach out to me via email or see my professional work, it is at raven-martin.com. That is raven-martin.com. And that's just about it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So definitely, if you want to be nosy and be all up on all the social media things, and you can keep up with Raven in that way across social media and online as well, on the website as well. I definitely appreciate you being on the show, and just sharing some of yourself, sharing part of your story with the people. And this is important to me because I think that it boils back down to that whole representation. There's, other folks who will be able to identify with your experience with, growing up in an environment that was, one specific way, and then really gradually transitioning into your own personhood, your own queerness, your own womanhood, all of that. As you grew and explored and saw the world. And it's like really exploring the world allowed you to explore yourself as well. And there will be people who either can relate to that personally, or who that will give them, some type of model or possibility of something that could happen for them.
I hope so. Yeah.
That's what's important. There may be folks who never even thought like, I might have such and such experience in another country. They may have never even imagined that. And I think for me, one of the most important things about QLIC is to provide that for our folks, because so many other people have it. They can look to, all over the place and see all these different possibilities of what could happen for them. And we deserve that too. So I appreciate you being a part of that. All right, y'all, for folks who are, whether you're new or whether you're a BRQ veteran, I want to thank you for tuning in. I definitely appreciate it as always. If you want to further support the podcast, you can do so by becoming a patron. Shout out to my patrons. Like y'all don't understand. Y'all holding me down. Definitely helping out. But yeah, so check that out if you're interested. I'll make sure that the information is in the show notes, as well as Raven's information will be in the show notes. And y'all know I don't have a formal like outro. I just be like, all right, y'all, bye. So that's, that's how that's going to be as usual. So thanks for tuning in, y'all. And until next time, that's it. I'm done and I'm out. Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javia Nicole. BRQ is produced and edited by Charmaine Fury, and the show's theme music was created by The Brothers Records. You can connect with us on Twitter or Instagram at Black Rad Queer. That's BLK RAD QWR. You can also connect with us on Facebook through the Black Radical Queer Podcast Facebook fan page or the BRQ discussion group. You can get Black Rad Queer merch on teespring.com/Black Rad Queer, BLK RAD QWR. And you can leave a voicemail, call in, ask a question, those types of things on the BRQ Google Voice line. And that number is 937-601-8647.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.